Few slides. Extra reshow.
Yeah. Rob, do you want to make her or
Here.
or Barry?
You want the magic?
I'll try it, but if it malfunctions on me, I'm just gonna.
You can just
Throw it out. I'm just gonna open that window and just chuck it out.
Well, new one's supposed to arrive next week.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I'm
Be
happy
better
to
next
click if
week.
you want.
So it's just this up and down arrow, right?
Yeah, the one where you want an audible click, an old man's click. Click!
We'll change next
Well, you
week. If
can
you want to
feel
pitch
the
again
click.
next week, we can do it.
Oh, good idea. Why didn't I think about that?
You haven't tied it to AI, so his slides just come up as he's talking.
That's
Yeah,
voice.
what was the AI program where you type everything in and then you've got a person that's actually talking as if.
Oh yeah, I've not explored that.
Yeah.
You can do that.
You can, yeah.
You just do your whole thing in
We
there,
just type
and then you
everything
just
up and
let
then
it
put
just
it on an AI and then we just watch it on the screen.
It speaks for you.
It speaks for, it's actually a real person. It's a real person, but it looks exactly like a real person.
Just type it and with
You just
emotion.
type it in.
With
yeah.
emotion.
Yeah, depending on how you type it. Yeah, with emotion.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, and there's the one where you record yourself, and then it'll play back audio, and it'll adapt to your voice and your in how you intone things, and it'll do your speech.
It's amazing. It's amazing what people
Yeah.
invent nowadays.
Soon you can have a virtual sermon and a virtual congregation.
Yes.
You have an avatar and just leave an iPad on the chair.
Yeah, the robots listens by themselves. The robot listens to themselves.
Well, that's kind of where they want us to go.
No, it's interesting. I mean, even like with movies now, they're making like Harrison Ford. They will make like the new Indiana Jones movie, but with
Yeah.
VR Harrison. Yeah.
They just took all of his content from before. They played it into the AI. The AI reads it. They do everything based on.
They changed his face,
Yeah.
so it looks like he was like 30,
Yeah.
years younger.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, but you can, we'll see what
Soon
happens.
we will have no idea what we're actually watching
Yep.
has any
Well, that's the
connection
thing.
to reality.
That's the thing. It's going to be more and more difficult to see. You know, if you watch any movie, even with the
Throws
latest.
discernment out the window.
Yeah.
Ironically, I started writing an essay on spiritual discernment this morning.
Right. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
Come on, Rob.
Right. Right. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob.
Good morning, Rob.
Morning, Rob.
Hope everyone had a good week. I know some people, speaking to a couple of people before the service, everyone sort of had this really, really busy week, including myself. But it's great to be here. It's great to be able to to sort of put that behind us and just really refocus and just really get a lot out of, as much as we can out of God's Word this morning. So this morning, I mean, it was great because Alex sort of mentioned, in the welcome, who about, when you think of strength, who do you think about, and I'm like, oh, it's great. I didn't speak to Alex at all, before this, so, but it's nice little introduction. But I mean, we all know the story of Samson. I remember growing up, I used to watch little, cartoons. And portray the story of Samson, and how he was really, really strong, and he had all these things going for him, and then he fell, and then he got into some trouble, and then he eventually, or we know what happened in the end, right? But we're going to go through go through Judges, and just to really to sort of look at the story of Samson, because Samson was sort of born about 1,000 years after Moses, right? So no, not 1,000 years after Moses. 400 years after Moses, stand corrected, but 1,000 BC. That's what I wanted to say, right? So 1,000 BC, 400 years after Moses. But you know, when you think of strength, apart from Samson, but the modern day strength, like we are strong today, what do you think of when you think about a strong person or strength in general? What comes to your mind? That means
Resilience?
resilience.
Yeah.
What was that?
Schwarzenegger.
Arnold Schwarzenegger. Yeah, the physical strength.
Alex.
Physical 100.
Physical 100.
Physical 100. I don't know what that is. But anyway, yeah, you know, Alex. You know, our own beefcake. You know, there's just so many. There's just so many. Yeah. What else comes to your mind when?
No, I was just remembering when we moved into Wokingham, we have this cross trainer and it's really heavy. And I mean, Robert's strong, but he, you know, nobody could move it. And then Francois, Koets, Rudy, and our son, he came and he just picked this thing up. He just moved it. So it was like.
Yeah, I remember that. You know, he just picked it up, and I'm like, oh, and he just picked it up and said, "Where do you want this?" I'm like, "Yeah, have it over there, please, thanks." How did you do that? Anyway, so yeah, no, he was quite strong, yeah. Anything else that comes to your mind when you think about strength?
I just generally think of men in general, because I was over at Ada's the other day, and there was like, I was trying to pull apart a bit of a Hoover, and I was like, and that, you know, Chike, who stayed with her, and I just said, did he pull those apart, and he just went like that, and he just carried on doing what he was doing like that.
Yeah.
And
So,
that reminds me of Samson,
mm-hmm.
because it's like, I couldn't get it apart, and he just did it without thinking,
Yeah.
you know.
I think mental strength as well, you know, because somebody can be physically very strong, but you know, you throw a few mental curveballs at them and they collapse. So I think mental strength, you know, somebody who can stand up amongst a lot of emotional turmoil that's going on or events that's happening, and they can actually absorb and process all these things and not cracks mentally. So
Yeah. Yes. There's a hidden message in that one, but anyway. So yes, it's very important to have the mental strength, right? Because you know you can. I mean, I often say to Raleen, you know, I am physically. I don't do my work. I don't do physical work, but I sit in front of a desk, you know, every single day, Monday to Friday, and by the end of the day, mentally, I am just done. You know, and so because you can get, you know, really exhausted mentally, you know, if that's the work, you know, I mean, but then, you know, you have the people in our NHS, you know, Becky, maybe some of your colleagues, you know, where it's like, it's physical, but it's also mental. You have to make sure, you know, you look after the people and you give them what they need, and, you know, and yeah, so hats off to NHS workers. You know, because the story of Samson came in a time where the Israelites did evil in the eyes of God, and then, you know, and then they were subject to the Philistines for about 40 years, and so in the story of Samson sort of starts in Judges chapter 13, and we are going to go there now. What worked? So, Judges 13, if you read from verse 2 to 5, so this is Samson's parents. A certain man of Zorah named Manoah, from the clan of the Danites, had a wife who was childless, unable to give birth. The angel of the Lord appeared to her and said, "You are barren and childless, but you are going to become pregnant and give birth to a son. Now see to it that you drink no wine or other fermented drink, and that you do not eat anything unclean. You will become pregnant and have a son, whose head is never to be touched by a razor, because the boy is to be a Nazirite, dedicated to God from the womb. He will take the lead in delivering Israel from the hands of the Philistines." And then in verse 13 to 14 it says, the angel of the Lord answered, because then Manoah's wife came and told him this is what happened. You know, an angel came to her, and then she basically repeated what the angel said to her. The angel said of the Lord answered, your wife must do all that I have told her. She must not eat anything that comes from the grapevine, nor drink any wine or other fermented drink, or eat anything unclean. She must do everything I have commanded her. So Manoah didn't believe his wife initially, and she took him back to the place where they had met the angel, and then the angel was there again, and then he had to explain it to him. But it's quite interesting because, I mean, even now, you know, if you're pregnant, you know, we know that women you shouldn't be drinking alcohol. But the interesting thing it also says here, do not eat anything that comes from the grapevine. Well, I see loads of pregnant women eating grapes. I don't know, you know, medically if that has anything, you know, to do, but yeah, maybe
sugar.
people.
I wasn't allowed to eat because of high sugar concentration.
The high sugar concentration, right? Okay. Yeah. So yeah.
So it makes sense.
It makes sense. It makes sense. Yeah. Thanks for that, Shami. And so later on in Judges chapter 13, the woman gave birth to a boy and named him Samson. He grew, and the Lord blessed him. And the Spirit of the Lord began to stir him while he was in Mahane Dan, between Zorah and Eshtal. So normally you have, you know, I mean, there's not really much description here of exactly what, you know, what Samson was like growing up. It was, you know, pretty much just these two verses, right? And, you know, unlike you know, Noah, who had a physical interaction with God, and you know, Moses, you know, and Jonah, you know, in the fish, you know, there was a connection with God, but for some reason Samson didn't. I don't know why, but you know, but this is really all that was described, you know, all that says about him as he was growing up. But it says here, he grew and the Lord blessed him, and the Spirit began to stir in him. You know, because, you know, I think back to the time when because I never grew up religious. Okay, I went, you know, my only introduction to Christianity was because I was staying in boarding school here in Winchester when I was small. And then in the school there was a little chapel. You know, because I was in boarding school, I didn't go home every single day, and I only went home every 2 or 3 weeks. But then on the Sunday, the boys and the girls that was in the school, they would go into the chapel, and then they'll have hymns, they'll have, you know, they'll have a little mini service. I don't remember anything that was said in the service, but I just remembered seeing some of the songs. Onward Christian Soldier and all that stuff, you know. Which I guess, Roger, you might know those ones. But anyway, so you know, and that was it. But then, you know, during the times, I remember in the rest of my primary school, in secondary school, I didn't go to church at all, you know. But if I look back on it, there were certain times where, you know, God was just nudging me towards Him. Whether it's, you know, from friends, you know, that went to a Bible study group, you know, within the church and during break time, not with the church, within the school during break time, or you know, there was one boy that encouraged me to go to a you know, Christian camp with the school for a long weekend once, you know, but you know, that never sort of culminated in anything permanent. Okay. Until when I was about 19, and I was in Hong Kong, and I was working there for a year, and then someone met me, and then that was when, you know, I started really looking into the Bible, you know, but before that, I can see that all those little seeds of interaction led me and prepared my heart for that situation. And it's the same with Samson, because he didn't, you know, it didn't seem like there was any major events in his life, but there was just little, you know, there was probably little bits of occurrences in the time's life, then that God prepared for him to do his will. Okay, but still, Samson is actually quite an interesting character. His strength symbolizes, in us today, I believe, intellectual strength we spoke about, physical strength, emotional strength, spiritual strength, spiritual gifts. And I want to just sort of think, what sort of, is there someone that you appreciate for their strength? For whether it's physical, whether it's they might have helped you do something in the past. Their spiritual strength, emotional strength. Is there someone in your life or that you've interacted with that you feel like you really appreciate because they have that strength and they were able to have that impact on you?
Are we sharing it?
Yes. Yeah.
Abiola came to mind because I think she's very strong and she's a really strong woman of prayer. Like, she's great to go to in prayer, and just longevity of determination and resilience.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, often we need those people around us. When we are not strong ourselves, and and we're discouraged, we just need that person, whoever that is, to be able to sort of say, come on, let's to encourage you. Yeah.
I just think Roger and Marianne, just getting keeping us going, and making sure there's a service for us, and I know I often organise stuff, and I know how hard it is to do that, and how discouraging it is when people don't come to the party, or don't, and I think that often happens. That's just life, and I think you guys just, soldiering on, and not giving up, and so well done.
I mean, being in a situation where for a lot of people it's easy to become weary, so we do appreciate you guys just pushing on and making sure that we are, we're encouraged. So thank you. Anyone else? No. So again, I mean, have a think. You might think later on, in your own time, how much someone of strength has helped you, and then you appreciate that, and then we go into, where are we? Into Judges chapter 14. So Samson was born, and we know that God had put a spirit in him, but it sort of went downhill after that. So I went downhill after that. And we'll read in Judges chapter 14 from verse 1 to verse 19. Samson went down to Timnah and saw there a young Philistine woman. When he returned, he said to his father and mother, "I have seen a Philistine woman in Timnah. Now get her for me as my wife." His father and mother replied, "Isn't there an acceptable woman among your relatives or among all our people? Must you go to the uncircumcised Philistines to get a wife?" But Samson said to his father, "Get her for me. She's the right one for me." His parents did not know that this was from the Lord, who was seeking an occasion to confront the Philistines, for at that time they were ruling over Israel. Samson went down to Timnah together with his father and mother. As they approached the vineyards of Timnah, suddenly a young lion came roaring towards him. The Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him, so that he tore the lion apart with his bare hands, as he might have torn a young goat. But he told neither his father nor his mother what he had done. Then he went down and talked to the woman, and he liked her. Sometime later, he went back to marry her. He turned aside to look at the lion's carcass, and in it he saw a swarm of bees and some honey. He scooped out the honey with his hands and ate as he went along. When he joined his parents, he gave them some, and they ate it too. But he did not tell them that he had taken the honey from the lion's carcass. Now his father went down to see the woman, and there Samson held a feast. as was customary for young men. When the people saw him, they chose 30 men to be his companions. "Let me tell you a riddle," Samson said to them. "If you can give me the answer within the 7 days of the feast, I will give you 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes. If you can't tell me the answer, you must give me 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes." Tell us your riddle," they said. "Let's hear it." He replied, "Out of the eater, something to eat. Out of the strong, something sweet." For 3 days, they could not give the answer. On the 4th day, they said to Samson's wife, "Coax your husband into explaining the riddle for us, or we will burn you and your father's household to death. Did you invite us here to steal our property?" Then Samson's wife threw herself on him, sobbing, "You hate me. You don't really love me. You've given my people a riddle, and you haven't told me the answer." "I haven't even explained it to my father and mother," he replied. Why should I explain it to you?" She cried the whole 7 days of the feast. So on the 7th day, he finally told her, because she continued to press him. She in turn explained the riddle to her people. Before sunset, on the 7th day, the men of the town said to him, "What is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion?" Samson said to them, "If you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have solved my riddle." Then the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him. He went down to Ashkelon, struck down 30 of their men, stripped them of everything, and gave their clothes to those who had explained the riddle. Burning with anger, he returned to his father's home, and Samson's wife was given to one of his companions who had attended him at the feast. So it's kind of interesting because, suddenly, Samson was at an age where he's grown up, right? He saw a girl that he liked in the opposition and the Philistines, and no asking advice from his parents or anything. He just wanted to marry her. So he went, in the end, he went and married her, and that was his wedding day. There was 30 men, companions, I guess, 30 groomsmen. I don't know what they were, what the term companion meant back then. And then he thought, he'll ask them a riddle that they will never know the answer to, because only he knows that he killed a lion. Only he knows that he had eaten the honey from the lion. Okay, so, and then, they were like, "Oh, listen, his companions, asked his wife to get the answer from him, because they didn't want to lose and have to give Samson their garments and their clothes. And so what, and then what does Samson do? He burns with anger, and then he goes and it says struck down. I don't know if he struck down means he killed 30 other people, or he just beat them up really badly and took their clothes. But then he went out and took clothes and garments from somebody else and gave it. And on his wedding night, he gave his wife to somebody else. That's, I'm very surprised to see that happen today. Where you get married and then suddenly you say, right, Henry, I don't like you. And someone gives their wife to their groomsmen. But the point here is that Samson's temper got the better of him. And he thought that he was perhaps in a high position. He was strong. He was powerful. And he probably thought that he could do anything, and he was revered amongst everybody. So that was a bit of he was probably a bit prideful in the way that he thought about himself. About 8 years ago, I was working in an office in Reading, and I was working for the client at that time, for a client organization at that time. And after I left there, I went into another organization, a company, which is a supplier to that client. Okay, so I was no longer sitting on the client side, I was sitting on the supplier side. And I was given this project to manage for about 8 months. But my mindset hadn't changed. My mindset was still, I'm the client, so I should be able to tell people, what needs to be done. Okay, and I can, so I remember it was coming to the deadline of this one project. Okay, and it was about 7 months into the project, and I needed, because I had various people that had to do things for me. Okay, and I relied on them because they are specialists in that area to be able to produce a part of the overall report that I was trying to write. So a week before we had to issue this report to the client, I phoned this one guy. I said to him, look, have you done this part? Can I have a look at it so that we can, massage it together if we need to, and then and present it. He says, I haven't even started it. I was busy with something else, and at that time, and we were in an open plan office, probably the size of this, and I was sitting facing everybody else, and I just was not happy. I just sort of laid into him, and I raised my voice, and I'm like, I can't remember what I said, right? But whatever I said, it's like one of those things where in the Wild West movies, you walk into a saloon and then suddenly the music dies. Like everything just goes quiet. That was what it was like in the office. So then one of the guys, who's a very good friend of mine now, said, right, Rob, can you let's go to the meeting room and have a chat. Okay. So we had this chat. And he says, Rob, this isn't, I appreciate your frustrations, but this isn't the way that you need to behave. This isn't the way that we should be presenting ourselves. And I said to him, look, I in the heat of the moment, I just said, yeah, thank you very much. Okay, let me just get on with my work. But then afterwards, I think, what? Yes, I should have controlled myself, a lot better. It didn't end there though, because a week later, someone came from the head office all the way up from York, right, and had to have a chat with me, and it was and he said to me, Rob, what, this, it's very important because we are a supply chain now. We're providing a service to other people. Right. Okay, you're not on that organization anymore, okay, and you have to sort of come down to this level and work with the people that's in your team, And the one thing that he said to me, he actually recommended a book which you get online. But he said to me, Rob, what got you here won't get you there, if that makes sense, So that sort of made me think, it's like, yes. There was a path that brought me to a certain stage, a certain place for that job. But then that mentality won't take me further, and I have to change my mentality. And that's what Samson sort of made me think. He was a powerful man, very strong, and that got him to a certain position. But it won't take him, it won't take him, in another direction. The lesson that he didn't learn was that, he had to use, if he was in a different position, that he would have to, change his mindset. He would have to change the way that he behaves, and not be so arrogant, and not be so, not feel that he has to, or abuse his power. The question is, how do we let our temper control us? And do we how are our decisions affected? by the lack of emotional strength. I've had to learn how to interact with people over the years. Okay, and you know, before the pandemic, I spoke to I spoke to a counsellor because I had a lot of stuff in my past that I had to deal with, and then she helped me to see that I needed to step in somebody else's shoes. I needed to go and understand other people more, and not to fight my own corner all the time. You know, and it took a year. Every week, it took a year. You know, but you know, eventually I started to understand the importance of being able to understand other people's needs over my own. James chapter 1, 19-20, it says, talks about being quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. But interesting thing is that in verse 19, it says the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him. So when he struck down those 30 people, interesting, it was the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him, and then that's what he did.
Yeah.
Right? So in Judges chapter 15, we go and we read there. Later on, at the time of the wheat harvest, Samson took a young goat and went to visit his wife. This is the same wife that he got married to. I'm going to my wife's room, but her father would not let him go in. I was so sure you hated her, he said, that I gave her to your companion. Isn't her younger sister more attractive? Take her instead. Samson said to them, this time I have a right to get even with the Philistines. I will really harm them. So he went out and caught 300 foxes and tied them tail to tail in pairs. I mean, how much time? I mean, 300 foxes. I'd be lucky, you'd be lucky if you see one in your, but he caught 300. He then fastened the torch to every pair of tails, lit the torches, and let the foxes loose in the standing corn of the Philistines. He burned up the shocks and standing corn together with the vineyards and olive groves. When the Philistines asked who did this, they were told, Samson, the Timnite son-in-law, because his wife was given to his companion. So the Philistines went up and burned her and her father to death. Samson said to them, since you've acted like this, I swear that I won't stop until I get my revenge on you. He attacked them viciously and slaughtered many of them. Then he went down and stayed in the cave in the rock of Etam. The Philistines went up and camped in Judah, spreading out near Lehi. The people of Judah asked, why have you come to fight us? We have come to take Samson prisoner, they answered, to do to him as he did to us. Then 3,000 men from Judah went down to the cave in the rock of Etam and said to Samson, don't you realize that the Philistines are rulers over us? What have you done to us? He answered, I merely did to them what they did to me. They said to him, we've come to tie you up and hand you over to the Philistines, as if that's going to work. Samson said, swear to me that you won't kill me yourself. Agreed, they answered. We will only tie you up and hand you over to them. We will not kill you. So they bound him with 2 new ropes and led him up from the rock. As he approached Lehi, the Philistines came towards him shouting. The Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him. The ropes of his arms became like charred flax, and the bindings dropped from his hands. Finding a fresh jawbone of a donkey, he grabbed it and struck down 1,000 men. Interesting here, because so Samson wanted to see his wife, the wife that he gave to his companion, right? So Samson wanted to see her. Then her dad's like, no, she's now married somebody else or given to somebody else, and you can't see her. But then instead of Samson thinking that this was a result of his own temper, he goes and does this and burns all the Philistines' property. Grabs some foxes, burn all the olive groves, all the vineyards, and that. So he still doesn't see that this was the result of his actions. They all come. So then he goes runs away and hides in a cave, with the people of Judah. And then the Philistines come along, and and then the people of Judah is like, oh, hang on a second, what are you doing? We didn't do anything, but you're hiding, in a cave, with us or near us, and then all these Philistines is going to come, and we're going to get punished because of what you did. So Samson came out, and ordinarily people at this stage should actually see that they've actually did something wrong, and maybe look at an apology, but no, he doesn't. He saw the Philistines, grab a donkey's jawbone, and then kills 1,000 of them. It's again. But the interesting thing is in verse 14, it says the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him before he took donkey's jawbone and killed 1,000 Philistines. So it's interesting that both the time when he went and struck down those 30, he lost his temper, he struck down those 30 people and took their clothes, and the time when he killed 1,000 Philistines with a donkey's jawbone, the Spirit of the Lord came upon him. It kind of, so this tells us that this is part of God's plan.
Yeah.
Okay? This was part of God's plan. But sometimes I can't help but think that maybe God's plan was still to deliver Philistines and deliver Israel from the Philistines. But could it be that Samson was so stubborn and prideful and arrogant that God had to try and put a spirit in different situations in order to try and again and again to deliver the Israelites from the Philistines' hands. So anyway, we don't know, but we know that God is trying to use Samson to achieve his purpose. Okay. A few scriptures comes to mind that I've when it comes to pride. Proverbs 11 verse 2, it says, when pride comes, then comes disgrace, but with humility comes wisdom. Proverbs 16 verse 5, the Lord detests all the proud of heart, but be sure of this, they will not go unpunished. Proverbs 16 verse 18, pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall. In Judges chapter 16, that's when he met Delilah, right? So he met Delilah, and we read there in verse, we can start from verse 4. Sometime later he fell in love with a woman in the valley of Sorek whose name was Delilah. The rulers of the Philistines went to her and said, see if you can lure him into showing you the secret of his strength, and how we can overpower him so that we may tie him up and subdue him. Each one of us will give you 1,100 shekels of silver. So Delilah said to Samson, tell me the secret of your great strength. Okay. I mean, we're not going to go into the whole story, right? But what was Delilah tempted by? She was tempted by money, wasn't she? It was like, and I think one of the things that that we can see here is that Samson's weakness, one of Samson's weaknesses, was obviously women. Okay, and and that led to his downfall. Okay, I mean, what weaknesses do we give into? And have regretted afterwards. You don't have to answer that, okay? But just think about it. And sometimes we give into those weaknesses again and again and again. Okay. When I was 19, and Raleen will remember this, I went to Hong Kong. I worked for a whole year because I needed to do that to pay for my studies myself. I had some money left over, or some spare cash, and I thought, I'm going to buy myself a car. Okay, and if you're old enough, you will know that in the late 90s, a Golf GTI 16 valve was very, very popular. Okay, it had 4 lights in the front, but I wanted this car with a certain look, sporty look, big exhaust that sounded like it was broken, but wasn't. And so I went with some of my friends, and we looked at different cars, and we looked at the car, and then my friend's like, this is. So he gave me my opinion, his opinion. I said, this car is really good because the engine sounds great. He doesn't see there's anything wrong with it. So out of all the ones we saw, he said, he would go for it. Personally, he would go for that one. But it's my decision. That didn't have the right look for me. I didn't have the right look for me. So, and then there was another car that I saw which looked exactly the way I wanted it to look. Okay, the guy went for a test drive. I bought it in the end. But then, what I didn't see was the underlying problems that this car had. Okay, I had to replace the clutch. There was things wrong with the gearbox. I would shop at Raleen's house, and the bumper would fall off. And then I'd be carrying this bumper into the house. Just say, listen, we're going to go out, but just keep this in your house. And I spent so much money on it because I didn't listen to my friends who said, listen, this isn't a very good one, and buy something else. But no, I was focused on how this thing looked, and not how this thing was like under the hood. Okay. Eventually I sold it and moved on from that. But quite often, and this is what happened with Samson. He was looking on the outside, of his relationships. He wasn't looking at the heart, and he wasn't looking at what was inside. Okay, and as a result, and he couldn't even see. Delilah went to him time and time again. Oh, and he tells her a lie to say, this is the secret of my strength. And then she says, oh, the Philistines are upon you. And then he breaks, whatever was tying his arms together, And I think she did it, 3 times, something like that. And then it was like, but you think by the 3rd time, you can actually
couldn't see it coming.
That this woman has ulterior motives, okay? He doesn't, for some reason, he doesn't see that, and then eventually he gets fed up of her nagging, and then he tells her how to, his hair needs to be shaved, and then that led to his capture, and as a result, he was captured by the Philistines, and they gouged out his eyes. And he was thrown in prison. The question is, who do we choose to be our closest friends? Because the people that we choose to be the closest to us are the ones that impact us the most. Whether it's life advice or whether it's spiritual advice, when you were in school, when I was in school, I just wanted to hang around. I've got another story. when I went, let me tell you. Do you want to, let me tell you anyway.
Yeah.
So when I was in school, and I'm really not proud of this at all. I was about 13 years old, and I wasn't a very popular child at school, but I did I did want to be sort of in with the children, right? So there's one child. He said to me, because he lived on this, because Hong Kong is made of these lots of little islands, right? So his family lived on one of these islands. He says, oh, why don't you come sleep over at my house? He was one of the popular kids. I said, great, I'll come with you. And then he says, well, you know what? There's this parking area, and he's found that this car is parked there, this taxi, and the guy keeps on leaving his keys in there. He says, why don't we take it for a drive? Oh dear, right. Anyway, so then we get to at night. We get there, and then he says, "Well, there it is." You know, he says, "Rob, why don't you give it a go and see if it turns and all that stuff." So and I thought, oh, well, this is going to make me popular now. In my mind, I'm thinking this will make me popular with the other kids at the school. Not popular with the police, which happened after. Anyway, so then I got in there, I turned the key on, I'm like, right, how do you drive a car? Yeah. So I got the pedals, and this car had it didn't have the shifter, in the middle. It had one of these shifters that's attached to the steering wheel. I said, okay, I'm going to figure this out. So, so then eventually, you see this car driving out of this parking, like, just jerking, because I couldn't handle the clutch properly. And then eventually we took turns driving this car around the island. I was 13 at the time. But anyway, so then my friend drove past the petrol station, and someone else saw this. But he was from, I think he was from either the UK or Australia. I can't remember where. But he had blonde hair. So then obviously it stood out. In Hong Kong, you got blonde hair, you actually do stand out a little bit, especially if you're driving a car and you're a little boy. So then someone saw, and then they came and then basically stopped us, and then next one thing led to another, and we found ourselves in a police station. Okay. Fortunately, they said, look, because you are 13 years old, okay, the police commissioner said, I'm going to give you a chance. I'm going to give you one chance. If you do this again, then we're not going to be so light on you. Okay, and that was and that was the end of it, fortunately, But my point is, who are we influenced by? Yeah. Who are you influenced by when you're younger, when you're in school, the teens, even us as adults, and we need to draw people close to us that can influence us in a positive way. I wasn't planning on sharing that, but I thought it might be
the spirit.
The spirit led me.
The Spirit of the Lord.
The Spirit of the Lord just came upon me, and I had to share that with you.
And powerfully, yeah.
For some reason, I'm sure some of you will go away after today, and you remember, yeah, Rob told me this story. Therefore, I need to pick my friends carefully.
Good story.
Come on, Rob.
Anyway, but then we see afterwards. We see afterwards in Judges chapter 16. He was in prison. He was blind because he had no eyes, and I'm sure as a result of that, then he had a lot of time to think and reflect on on what's been happening over the last two chapters. And he was asked to perform, because the Philistine says, right, we have now conquered, Samson, the man who killed thousands of us, and now look at him, he's weak, and they wanted to mock him. And so they brought him out to the stage in the temple to be able to dance for them and do whatever, and mock him. But little did they know that his hair was growing back, and as his hair grew back, we all know his strength returned to him. Okay, and so he asked one of the servants to put him in a position where he's between the two pillars, so his hands can touch the two pillars and the two pillars that supported the temple. And in verse 28 in Judges chapter 16, verse 28 to 30, he says, "Then Samson prayed to the Lord." Interesting, because this is the first time that the Bible actually records him praying to God. Maybe he should have done it early on, but anyway, then Samson reached towards then Samson prayed to the God, "Sovereign Lord, remember me. Please, God, strengthen me just once more, and let me with one blow get revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes." Then Samson reached towards the 2 central pillars on which the temple stood. Bracing himself against them, his right hand on the one and his left hand on the other, Samson said, "Let me die with the Philistines." Then he pushed with all his might, and down came the temple on the rulers and all the people in it. Thus he killed many more when he died than while he lived. So he, after a time of reflection, I'm sure he understood what led him to be in that situation, and then he started to depend on God. I mean, we shouldn't go through the process of seeing, oh, we made so many mistakes and regret our mistakes perhaps before we turn to God. For some it's happened, it's in the past, but we can learn from it. Interesting thing is that again, Samson says, he says he wanted to get revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes. But God's purpose was to deliver Israel from the hands of the Philistines. So his focus wasn't, let me help the Israelites, to be free. He was like, my eyes. I want to, get revenge because of what they did to me. Okay, so so even at that time, and I'm sure his heart was there where he wanted to rely on God. But it still tells me that his focus was, was not on the Israelites, or not on God's purpose. Okay, otherwise he would have said, help me, give my strength so I can help and free the Israelites. But still, we look back, and and we see that this is God, despite who Samson was, despite Samson's flaws, God was like, he needs to use him in order to achieve his purpose. God was working in the background. But besides Samson's flaws, this teaches us that we need to find our strength in God. We need to find our strength in conducting ourselves in the teachings from the Bible, and how we, the story about about what got me here won't get me there. It's important to understand, that we need God. We need His Bible. We need His Word, His guidance, people around us to be able to take us there. So, in conclusion, we've got 3 points here. Find strength in our weaknesses by relying on God's grace and seeking His guidance. We need to be speaking to other people. We need to be surrounding ourselves with people who will be able to have a positive impact on us. Proverbs 3, verse 5 to 6, trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your path straight. Just lean not on your own understanding. The second point is reflect on areas of weakness in our lives and commit them to God in prayer. Just like me, I had to reflect on myself. The way that I behave. the way that my mindset of trying to take myself out of not thinking about myself, thinking about the other person, understanding the other person's emotions, feelings, needs, and doing what I can in the gifts that God has given me to be able to help other people. Matthew chapter 7. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there's a plank in your own eye? First take the plank out of your own eye, then you can see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. See, we also have the power to influence other people, to help other people. Some people may be quite impressionable, and they would need they need the wisdom of what we've learned in the past. If we don't control ourselves, the way that we talk, how we say things, it can have a negative impact on other people. You'd understand more of that when you're a parent. That our children are, they look at us and they think, this is, we're their role models. And the way that we behave, can either benefit them or put them in a disadvantage. The final point is our strength comes from our relationship with God and our willingness to surrender to His will. Psalm 59 verse 9 to 10 says, you are my strength. I watch for you. You, God, are my fortress, my God on whom I can rely. This was the same attitude with Jesus. At his weakest point in the Garden of Gethsemane, he was wrestling with God because he wanted to find strength in God rather than him. He saw his weaknesses. Samson didn't see his weaknesses. Jesus saw his weaknesses, and he understood that there is no alternative but to rely on God's strength. Okay, he even tried. He brought his disciples with him, because he felt that he needed his closest friends by him. They fell asleep, but he understood that he needed that, the companions and the people that could encourage him. He leaves this example to us. In our weakest times, in the times where we feel helpless, okay, we need to surround ourselves with people that can lift us up and guide us in our journey of life. With that in mind, let's go to God in prayer as we have the communion. Father, we are not perfect. We have so many flaws, but on the other hand, we have a lot of talents. Each of us is unique in our own way. We all have our strengths. We all have a lot to give. I pray that we'll focus on those strengths. We pray that one of our strengths will be our reliance on you, the desire, the heart to follow your word, follow your guidance, and to seek the encouragement from the fellowship. Thank you so much for your son, who sacrificed himself, who provided the ultimate example of how we need to rely on you, God. We're grateful for all these lessons that we can learn. We can learn in the Bible. We're grateful for all the stories, all the wisdom that comes from your word. It's something that we hold precious, close to our heart, and I pray that we will remember the sacrifices that you and your son have made, so that we can be here and learn and gain the wisdom and the knowledge that you desire for us. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.